It was a desperate dash against the clock in Emmerdale today, as Moira Dingle's family and friends fought to keep her from spending years in prison. The much-loved resident has spent most of 2026 locked up after being charged with double murder and suspected links to a criminal operation. Despite the accusations, Moira is completely innocent and has no idea that one of the key reasons for her imprisonment is Robert Sugden secretly planting passports at Butler's farm to set her up. Robert had been pushing aside his guilt for some time, convincing himself he only hid those fake documents to protect Victoria Sugden. When Joe Tate got hold of footage showing Victoria covering up John Sugden's death, he blackmailed Robert into framing Moira or risk exposing Victoria to the authorities. Since no solid evidence has been found to clear Moira's name, she recently told Aaron Dingle that she intended to plead guilty at her upcoming hearing. Once Robert learned about her decision, he was overwhelmed with remorse, knowing he was about to help send an innocent mother to prison. After admitting to Aaron Dingle that he was responsible for planting the passports, Robert seemed ready to turn himself in, but Aaron insisted they find another way to fix the situation. A phone call from Beowulf sparked a new lead, giving Moira's loved ones hope of finding a different solution. When Bear remembered details about a number plate he had hidden for Ray Walters, Robert and Aaron set out to trace its origin. Unexpectedly, Cami Hadik became the key figure in their search, successfully tracking Ray's old vehicle to a storage unit in Houghton. Robert and Aaron rushed to the location, only to be faced with hundreds of storage units, leaving them wondering how they could possibly locate the correct one before Moira entered her plea in just a few hours. Back at the house, a disheartened Robert and Aaron informed the family of their discovery. As soon as the storage unit was mentioned, Marlon Dingle remembered spotting a key for one of the units at the farm a few days earlier. At the storage facility, Aaron, Robert, Mackenzie Boyd and Paddy Kirk watched as DS Walsh and her team began going through piles of newly uncovered evidence. They all knew that if none of the documents were connected to Moira, it could finally prove her innocence. However, things were not that straightforward. Walsh explained that every piece of evidence needed to be officially recorded, meaning it couldn't be used immediately to help Moira. The process would take time, and presenting it in court right away wouldn't make a difference. Meanwhile, back at the prison, Moira was being escorted to her hearing. She briefly saw Kane, who shouted across the gates, telling her about the new evidence. But with the police unable to review everything before the hearing, has Moira's fate already been sealed? Emmerdale appears to have hinted at Dawn's exit storyline in an early ITVX release, following a tense clash with Joe that could mark the end of their relationship. This article includes spoilers from the April 12th episode, which has not yet been broadcast on ITV1, but is already available to stream online. Once again, Joe Tate proves he hasn't changed at all. In the latest episode, it becomes clear just how afraid he is of losing Dawn Taylor, as he spins yet another lie to stop their relationship from falling apart. Earlier in the week, Dawn caught Robert Sugden snooping on Joe's computer. Although Joe managed to cover his tracks at first, she later uncovered a video he had secretly recorded in January involving Victoria and John Sugden. Dawn was left deeply disturbed and confronted Joe straight away. From her perspective, he could have stepped in to help Victoria, but instead chose to film the situation for his own advantage. Joe attempted to justify his actions, claiming he never intended to go to the police and was only keeping the footage as leverage. However, the fact that he had hidden this secret for so long made Dawn feel sickened. She quickly packed a bag and decided to spend the night at Billy Fletcher's with their children. In the following episode, Dawn tried to keep her distance from Joe, but he soon managed to get through to her again. Despite his many faults and questionable behavior, Joe genuinely cares for Dawn, and she still has feelings for him too. She made him promise that he was no longer hiding anything, as she refused to be part of his pattern of hurting others. Joe reassured her that he was being truthful, and the two shared an emotional moment. However, if he had been completely honest, it's likely Dawn would have walked away for good, but that outcome may still be on the horizon. Joe has yet to confess that he was behind the destruction of Holly Barton's memorial tree just days earlier. At the time, Dawn made it very clear that if he was responsible, their relationship would be over. That warning now feels like a strong hint of what's to come. With the actress set to leave her role as Dawn Taylor later this year, the big question remains, will Dawn finally walk away from Joe when the full truth comes out? Emmerdale star Ryan Hawley has revealed a major challenge ahead for Robert and Aaron. It wouldn't feel like Emmerdale without some intense Robron tension. Fan favourites Robert Sugden and Aaron Dingle reunited last year, but their happiness didn't last long as complications quickly followed, especially when Robert's prison partner Kev Townsend arrived in the village. Kev was left heartbroken after learning Robert had reunited with Aaron, and although he initially left, he later returned near the end of 2025 as part of a revenge plot. However, he ultimately chose not to go through with putting Robert and Aaron at risk and walked away once again. As 2026 began, Robert found himself being blackmailed by Joe Tate. He was pressured into hiding fake ID cards at Butler's farm, which had originally come from a criminal source. Joe threatened to expose video evidence of Victoria Sugden killing her brother if Robert refused to cooperate. Determined to shield his sister, Robert followed Joe's demands, unaware at the time that the documents were linked to serious crimes, including drug trafficking, human exploitation, and slavery. If he had refused, Moira Dingle would never have been imprisoned. With no proof to clear her name or disconnect her from the criminal activities, it now seems likely she could face a lengthy sentence. Believing it might reduce her time behind bars, Moira chose to plead guilty at her hearing. When Robert learned of her decision, he was consumed with guilt, knowing his actions played a significant role in destroying her life. Last week, Robert finally confessed everything to Aaron. Although Aaron promised to keep the secret, he admitted he was uncertain about what this betrayal meant for their future together. Ryan Hawley recently opened up about whether the couple can overcome this difficult situation. He explained that their relationship will be pushed to its limits, especially due to everything happening with the farm and Moira, describing it as a huge obstacle they must face. He also pointed out the added complications involving Kane and the wider Dingle family, suggesting it won't be easy for them to navigate. In this week's episodes, Robert's guilt deepens further after he hears Kyle Winchester talking about his fears of Moira going to prison. Ryan shared how this moment deeply affects Robert, explaining that hearing Kyle's concerns makes him realize the true impact of his actions. It forces Robert to confront the consequences, leading him to believe the only way to make things right is to confess and face punishment himself, even if it means being charged with evidence tampering and returning to prison. Robert and Aaron soon uncover that Celia had a storage unit in Houghton which could contain vital proof to clear Moira's name. They managed to get hold of the key thanks to Marlon Dingle, who remembered seeing it while visiting the farm with Paddy Kirk. Emmerdale airs on weekday evenings at 8 p.m. on ITV1 and is also available for streaming on ITVX.